So it doesn't give a lot of time. Oh, I see we're recording. It
Hey,
doesn't give
Maggie,
a lot of time for adjustments. So, yeah.
I apologize. I'm interrupting you. I just realized that we had a few departments reach out to us and ask if we could record this specific session. As a general rule, we haven't been recording the office hour sessions, but because I think of the high level of interest, we were going to go ahead and record this session if everyone was okay with that. So I did just start that recording, just so everyone's aware. You probably got a little pop-up that happened. I apologize for jumping in on that.
No, I can just reiterate the pieces I just said. So essentially, depending what objectives each health department selected for the MCH program, they may need to do the community engagement assessment tool and/or the youth engagement assessment tool. Community engagement is required across Title V maternal and child health programs. And we know that it has been confusing, like the rollout of this this year. So if you only have the adolescent objective, so your adolescent well-being is your only objective for your agency, the only tool then that you need to utilize is the adolescent health, the youth engagement assessment tool. And I'll put the link back in the chat just so that that is hopefully captured in the recording. And it is at the very top of the web page in a blue box. So you'll click View Youth Engagement Assessment Tool. With this tool, it is intended to be a guide for your agency to look at how you're working with young people and to help develop practice changes to improve that as an agency. You do not need to report this tool to DHS. So we are not collecting responses for the youth engagement assessment. The community engagement assessment tool is different again. So if you have other objectives beyond adolescent well-being, you may need to do that. And they call that the CEAT often is the acronym. The adolescent engagement assessment tool does not need to be reported to DHS. You as an agency will walk through the tool. It will ask questions about how you're working with young people, whether you have policies and practices in place to make that possible. If you are not engaging with youth at all, so you already kind of know, like, yeah, we're really not doing that, then you can just complete the first section of the tool, which is around capacity. And the reason for that is those other sections aren't going to apply to you if you know you're not working with youth. So you will complete that tool, and then based on the tool responses, you'll develop at least one practice change. And the practice change, so essentially a way that you're improving how you work with young people, is the part that will be asked about in the quarterly reports. So as you completed your first Q1 reports sent out by Mary Cush, if that name helps to kind of connect the pieces here, would have asked about this. They're going to ask whether you've completed the tool. It's just a yes or no, and then ask for essentially a status update on your practice changes. I'm going to pause there and see if there's questions. And if you don't want to ask your question out loud, you're welcome to send it in the chat, and then I can kind of respond orally too. All right, well, feel free to keep noodling on that. If questions come up, you can always email me and I can help to clarify any confusion that exists. But we're hoping that this tool will just help health departments, help agencies to think about how they're working with the young people in their communities and try to improve that moving forward. And we're always here for your questions. And again, I'll just apologize because I know that the communication around this has been very messy with the state systems, not being able to be updated to reflect the correct tool. All right, I'm here if questions come up.
Fantastic, thank you. Oh, okay, all right, we have a question. Do you have an example of a practice change based on the tool? I was also just
Yeah.
going to note that in the tool at the very end, so as I spent time reviewing and preparing for the tool, at the very end in the appendix, there are some indicators of practice, and based on each of the 5, I think it's the 5 themes of the different tool, or of the 5 themes within the tool. And I thought that was really helpful as I was sort of reviewing the tool and thinking about how it would be utilized and implemented. So practice change could be connected to some of those examples, but Maggie, I'll go ahead and let you answer that question too.
That was almost exactly what I was going to say. So thank you. One of the reasons that we liked this tool is because it has a really robust appendix. When you open the PDF, I feel like some people are opening the PDF and being like, oh my goodness, this is so long, close. A lot of it is the appendix, and the appendix has many examples, really specific examples of what a practice change might be. And so I would encourage you to start there and look through that. And then to just look at like the prompts in the different sections of the tool and think about like if you marked, if you answered one of those in a way that you can look to improve in the future. So it might, it's likely going to be pretty specific to your agency, but there's lots of examples in the appendix.
And I just also like to echo another way that we can provide through extension some of that individualized technical assistance for counties is really centering around utilization of this tool. So if it is walking through like understanding how to utilize the tool and actually completing the assessment together as a team, we can provide some support around that. We can also provide some support and tools and strategies around ways that you can increase that your youth engagement in your counties and in all of your agencies. Taylor, again, today is here to share some very specific examples of how she's engaged youth in connection and collaboration with the health department, as well as with other organizations too. So she'll give us a kind of a wide swath on that. And then our partnership with Patch and the Youth Advisory Committee that is in the process of being developed, that we'll continue to share that information out, and we'll continue this theme of youth engagement really throughout all the remainder of our learning community calls and time that we have together. And if you have, again, specific questions that come to the surface that we could potentially highlight as a featured topic in another office hours session, we'd be happy to do that. But please don't hesitate to reach out to us at our email. We'll make sure to get that in the chat as well, our youth health email, a way to kind of ask for some of that individualized technical assistance to support your counties in both the assessment as well as some conceptualization of what this work can look like as you move forward in your work as well. All right, on that note, I'm going to make sure that Taylor has the ability to screen share, and we are going to turn it over to her. Fantastic. There we go. All right, Taylor, I am just grateful that you are able to join us today. Taylor Seal is our Youth Engagement and Outreach Specialist in Dane County. She has been doing tremendous work with Dane County Public Health, as well as other organizations in the county. And I reached out to her, and admittedly, somewhat last minute as a result of my vacation time. And she was just eager and excited and to share the work that she's been doing. So on that note, I'm going to turn it over to Taylor. Please feel free to ask questions in the chat. Please engage with her and the rest of our team here today in a way that really helps us to identify your needs and meet your needs all along this process. Thanks, Taylor. Take it away.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. As Danette mentioned, my name is Taylor, and I'm going to be talking to you just about some strategies that I've used for effective youth engagement. And like she said, within Extension, I'm a youth engagement and outreach specialist, which means that I work with youth, mostly middle and high school students across Dane County on a variety of public health, civic engagement, and creative placemaking projects and programs. But before I dive in, I just want to set the foundation for why meaningful and empowering youth engagement is so important. My research and background focuses on adverse childhood experiences and the arts, particularly how the arts can and should intersect with public health initiatives for better health outcomes. I've worked with youth for a very long time, but my passion for working with youth in health settings actually came from my MPH thesis project, where a community organization that served youth wanted me to create this set of recommendations for how they can be more inclusive and address access barriers to their facility, but actually had no intention or desire to talk to youth themselves. So with this slide, most I'm sure are likely familiar with adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, but we'll just do a quick review. So as we know, ACEs are defined as exposures to violence, abuse, neglect, or trauma that occur in childhood. And we know that there are short and long-term health consequences. With short-term, right, we see altered brain development from sustained cortisol levels in youth. It can negatively affect learning capabilities like memory, critical thinking skills, problem solving, and can also lead to increased risky behaviors like substance use and teenage pregnancy. And long-term, right, we're seeing that youth, when they transfer to adulthood, then have a more increased likelihood of developing chronic conditions, such as depression, heart disease, asthma, and diabetes. And so when it comes to preventing or mitigating the health consequences of ACEs, we say you need to build resilience. And what does that mean, right? And it can mean there's a lot of different definitions for it, but essentially it can be described as a person's capacity to rise above difficult circumstances, ability to recover from setbacks, challenges, or adversity. And as is, typically resiliency is often coined as an individual trait, right? Like we're saying this student needs to be more resilient. But if we consider this resilience to be a personality trait, then it really does put unjust blame on youth who have been exposed or experienced ACEs if they fail to struggle or overcome adversity, AKA you weren't resilient enough to overcome these challenges. And rather, we should approach the concept of building resilience through shaping external and built environments for youth to be resilient in. And you can see this really amazing quote from Dr. Monahan Atisha, who was part of bringing the Flint water crisis to the public. And I think she just describes it so perfectly, right? Of why are we putting resilience on children, and where we, as people in power, as people in health settings, we should be building environments for youth to be resilient in. And so one of the ways to build resilient environments is to center youth voice, right? So research shows that social connectedness, both with peers and adults in their community, contributes to positive mental health outcomes. And when youth are given opportunities to contribute to their communities in meaningful, empowering, impactful ways, it not only affects their mental and physical health positively, but it also betters the community as a whole, because youth are fostering identity and connection to a particular place and have direct input on the policies and programs that are intended to benefit them. And this is something, this graphic to the right here is something that has been introduced to this group before. But if you don't remember, that's all right. This is Hart's ladder of youth participation. It shows the degrees of participation or non-participation that youth can have in working on a particular project or program. We kind of want to obviously be more at the top. So for example, youth initiate shared decisions with adults. That means that youth have ideas and execute the project alongside adults. Whereas say consulted and informed, adults have the idea, maybe the idea is brought to a group of youth to be consulted, youth understand what the process is and that their opinions are taken into consideration, but ultimately the adults decide on how to move forward. And then all the way down into non-participation, tokenism, for example, youth are asked their opinion about a project, but actually have no choice in how they can express themselves or views, or are limited in what they can do about it. An example that I like to give is, again, for my MPH project, I was working with an organization. They were trying to come up with a logo for this new space. They couldn't decide, the board of adults, and so they couldn't decide between two options. So they wanted me to bring these two options to youth just to decide between the two. as opposed to having youth design the logo themselves. And so in this way, youth really didn't have a choice. They, could choose one logo or the other, but it's still, it wasn't the best way to engage youth. And then on the flip side, the board said, oh, we talked to youth and this is what youth wanted for the logo, but they didn't really. And then again, all the way down to decoration. Oftentimes, if youth take part in an event or project, perhaps they sing, perhaps they dance, perhaps they wear t-shirts or take a photo, but they don't really know about the issue or the project at hand. For example, if a youth is just given a survey and not told what the survey is for, what it's used for, they have no idea. But then oftentimes then that organization will say, oh, we engaged youth and we have youth input, even though that youth themselves would not be able to verbalize what that survey was used for, how that information would be used. And so part of my job is I support both adults who have never worked with youth before but want or need to, as well as advocate for youth to be in decision-making spaces where youth are not often considered or even brought into the conversation. And while many community entities contribute to youth health and work with youth directly, youth are often not thought of as key stakeholders. And there's often this toxic perception of youth that can be described as what's called a developmental mismatch, where we have the desire for youth to be empowered, for them to be independent and engage in leadership opportunities, while we simultaneously undermine them and because of their age. And I work with young people on a variety of projects, ranging from public health campaigns, reviewing and evaluating grants, that then those funds get allocated back into the community, working alongside city councils for construction and development projects. I've actually been told directly by adults that youth won't or aren't able to talk about complex and serious topics like social inequities, like structural racism, like substance use or mental health. And we just know that that's just absolutely not true. Another example I like to give is with a project I was working with youth on. It was for this youth space that was going to be built for this part of my MPH thesis project. And we were looking at access barriers. And one of the things that came up as an access barrier was how are we ensuring that our programs are accessible for youth who are in foster care. Youth who are in transitional housing. And so I was sitting with a group of youth, and one youth raised their hand, they said, what's transitional housing? And I could have given my own definition, right, or the definition of what we all use for transitional housing. But actually, one by one, each of the youth raised their hand. One kid said, oh, transitional housing means, you're living in an apartment before you move into your house. You have to stay there for a couple months. And then another kid raised their hand and said, oh, you're in transitional housing because you live with your dad on the weekdays and you live with your mom on the weekends. And then another kid raised their hand and said, oh, it means you're in foster care. And then another kid raised their hand and said, oh, it means your home isn't safe. So maybe you're staying, with an aunt, or maybe you're staying with friends. And all of those are correct, right? All of those are transitional housing. And then because of that conversation, then they just had this whole new perspective of what transitional housing can mean, and then how to solve a problem. So overall, we need to acknowledge, recognize, and value that youth are fully capable and knowledgeable to inform, shape, and change the conditions in which they live, work, and play. And in recognizing that youth have the expertise and understanding of these key issues that affect their health, the development, and well-being, utilizing youth in these shared decision-making processes with adults will better inform policies and programs that are intended to benefit them. So I just wanted to give just a couple examples before I dive into the big program that I kind of wanted to dive into the details with, but two programs that I'm a part of. One is called By Youth for Youth. It's a Dane County program that's been in existence for over 30 years in partnership with Extension, the county, the city of Madison, and United Way. Like its name, the goal is for By Youth for Youth is a youth committee to distribute funding for projects developed and implemented by youth to support K through 12 youth in Dane County. We work with a new group of high school students each year from October through April. We meet with them every week. We dive into data like the Dane County Youth Assessment, and they come up with their funding priorities for that year, as well as we organize field trips, hands-on learning experiences for them to learn more about the particular issues that they're passionate about. And this year was mental health, immigration, and food security. And this year they had over $36,000 available for funding. 13 grant applications were awarded, and they ranged from funding for LGBTQ youth mental health programming in community centers, sanitary products for low-income youth, US citizenship fees for some Libyan refugees, as well as covering the cost of a restaurant license for a local Afghani refugee, and funding a chicken coop at a local community center where youth were going to learn how to take care of the chickens and then also provide low-cost eggs for low-income families in their neighborhood. So again, valuing here that youth have the expertise to make decisions about their environments and are passionate to make tangible change. And another program I'm a part of is called the Fitchburg Teen Center. The city of Fitchburg is in the middle of what's called a Healthy Neighborhood Initiative, where they are really strategically thinking about how community development projects can contribute to the health of young people and families in the Fitchburg area. And so one of the proposals for construction is a teen center. And so this past year, we worked with 8 youth from the Fitchburg area, and they worked alongside the council, Equity by Design, UW Health, to design and engage in community outreach efforts. So youth designed their own surveys, they ran their own focus groups, they gave testimonies to the city council, and ultimately laid down the groundwork for what young people want in their community and what they want from this teen center. And their ideas range from recreation spaces, a library study area, a health clinic, employment support, pre-college support, reiterating again that, you know, instead of a build it and they will come mentality, it should be they built it, so they will come. Youth will feel ownership and identity to this place, as well as know what kind of support systems they want and need to be healthy. But the example that I really want to dive into is something that I've been working on this past year. I was approached by someone from Public Health Madison-Dane County who was new to this position and had was told that they had to run a Madison-based youth group that focused on commercial tobacco prevention as part of a statewide initiative. She had never worked with youth before, as well as she was reviewing the curriculum for this program, and she found it to not be as youth-led as well as it could have been and not impactful. So for example, you know, they kind of had these like activities that, these like pre-made activities that youth could do in the name of commercial tobacco prevention. And it would be things like spell out, you know, a hashtag in solo cups in your school fence, or write tobacco facts in chalk in front of your school, or change the lyrics to a popular song about the effects of tobacco and sing it in front of your class, which all of that sounds just not engaging, not effective, not impactful. And so she approached me to say, how can we make this program engage youth in better ways? I'm also struggling with recruitment. I can't get kids to join the group. I've never worked with kids before. I just don't even know where to start. So initially the public health department wanted me to just take over the program. They wanted to give me the grant money, let me run the program every single year and report out to them. But for most extension educators, we already have multiple projects and programs and initiatives that we're a part of. It's just not feasible to expect an extension educator to just take on a program, the entire program, when organizations need it. So instead I said, well, how about we work together, we collaborate. We can both show up to the meetings for this first year. We can collaborate. I want you to feel like after this process, you feel that you have experience working with youth, and then you can continue on the momentum for the next year. So then say if I leave or move to a different position, then the public health department isn't back to square one when working with this youth group that has to go every year. And so we work together and overall turned the program into something that the public health department and state departments just didn't really imagine. And it turned into something just actually super exciting and energizing and innovative. And a huge part of why that was so successful is how we set up the foundation of the program. So first, I created a very simple application. It was short and brief. I let kids know this was a commercial tobacco prevention coalition. They would get experience working with UW-Madison and the public health department. They would get a stipend for each meeting. And then, I just basically asked for their name, their school, their grade, 1 to 2 sentences is why they were interested in joining. And so instead of cold calling schools or community centers, I actually used, we leveraged our network to send applications to people that I had previously worked with or who knew me, who then pass it on to a youth that they work directly with. So then that application was coming from a trusted adult as opposed to someone who they had never met with or engaged with before. And so we ended up getting 8 incredible students ranging from 8th to 12th grade. We met bi-weekly at the Warner Park Community Recreation Center. Each meeting, we gave them a $25 stipend, dinner, and we also offered transportation assistance like Ubers, gas cards, and bus tickets. I'll dive into next what we did during each meeting, but I also wanted to reiterate that we had an over 90% attendance rate for the school year. And that directly came from providing a stipend, dinner, and transportation. So a lot of times youth would have a ride to the center, right? A parent or guardian would drop them off, but then if that parent worked, they weren't able to pick them up. So it really just helped, if they only had a one-way ride, being able to provide transportation assistance on the back end really, really helped. All right, so for this program at first, when you look at the curriculum of what this statewide initiative was, like I said, it wasn't youth-led. It wasn't super innovative. And so I convinced my public health colleague to kind of be like, we're not really going to use a script or a curriculum. Like we can kind of put some pieces together here. And she was a little wary of that, but I knew that if we grounded the youth in education and data, then they could establish an action plan for how they wanted to address commercial tobacco use among youth. So the first meeting, we just wanted to gauge where they were in terms of knowledge about commercial tobacco in general, statewide data, county data, extension data, Dane County youth assessment data. And so we did this in an interactive format instead of the program's provided slide deck, which was just one presentation that you give at the beginning, talking about what commercial tobacco is, and then you just let them do these set activities, and it's just a lot of checking boxes. So through this, we explored data regarding commercial tobacco use, the intersections among youth who vape, and food insecurity, poor mental health, poor academic performance, etc. And this was really a two-way street for us here, where youth surprised themselves by how much they knew or didn't know. And then we also learned that youth really didn't associate vaping or e-cigarettes with big tobacco. And so to ground the work even further and kind of going off of what we were learning from youth, I created this in-depth graphic illustrating the history of commercial tobacco from the first known spiritual and cultural uses among indigenous populations to how tobacco crops flourished due to colonialism, forcible Native American removal, and the Atlantic slave trade. In addition to major historical moments, I also gave visuals of how campaigns shifted over time from insensitive and stereotypical portrayals of Native Americans to ads saying that cigarettes can relieve symptoms from asthma, bronchitis, and shortness of breath. I continued the graphic into the 1900s, again, focusing on major moments in history that furthered the tobacco industry and how ad campaigns continued to shift over time due to cultural and social influences, and how these companies intentionally targeted LGBTQ youth and BIPOC communities. And then ending to the past few years, where we talked about the rise of e-cigarette use among youth and the correlations between COVID-19, as well as the intentionality, again, between targeting young people for vaping. We also talked about the Juul settlement, where this group actually received some of that funding from the Juul settlement, where Juul is forced to pay over $400 million to specific states for intentionally targeting and misleading youth on how addictive vaping is, as well as for sending Juul representatives into middle and high schools to promote their products and encourage youth to try them and give them to their friends. And so once we felt that youth had a strong grasp on the kind of background and history of commercial tobacco, as well as statewide, countywide data, we really wanted to dive in on a more local level. So we had the youth engage in a photo voice project. And so for those who aren't familiar, photo voice is a methodology where community members can show assets and challenges in their communities by taking pictures. It's a way to show different perspectives, ideas, stories, really just a way to visually collect lived experience data. And so we had, before they went on their winter break, we asked them to take 5 to 10 pictures of anything tobacco related in their school. And these are some that they had taken. I really like the picture of the tree in the mist, the student who took this said that it looked like lungs, the trees against the kind of haze and the mist. And I just thought that was really cool. So then we had, the students, we printed out all their pictures at our next meeting, and the youth worked together to categorize the photos. They shared what they were seeing in their different built environments. And it was a really creative method to facilitate discussion and center their experience. So after the activity, we asked them what they thought, and they said, like, wow, tobacco really is in all aspects of our lives. It's everywhere. It's in all places. It's overwhelming. It must be so hard for people who are addicted to tobacco. You can literally find it everywhere you go. They were shocked that they had to have a whole category just labeled school of what they were seeing in their schools. So then we began brainstorming. I know I'm kind of short on time here, so I'll just kind of hurry through these, but we just had them brainstorm their ideas of what they wanted to do. They ranged from educational initiatives to policy change at a local level. For example, the punishment policy at their school is if you're caught vaping, you just get sent home. And they're like, that doesn't help anybody. And they would just continue to vape or smoke when they're home. So again, it was super exciting to let the youth brainstorm and problem solve together, and really think about what those peer-to-peer impacts are, particularly for public health policy. And when we, it's really important to, again, include youth meaningfully with shared decision-making opportunities with adults. So one of the projects they decided on was, like, they had a school e-newsletter that went out weekly in their school. So they wanted to kind of create a series of information, eye-catching, easy to digest graphics for their peers. They also had a survey that they administered at the end. And from a survey development perspective, it was extremely valuable for them to create those questions and for them to say, if this question is worded this way, I wouldn't answer it. If the graphic looks like this is what I focus on. That's not the intention. And so that was just really beneficial, just to truly understand, like, what kind of information we wanted to get, and how we're going to make that happen with this population. But then their main idea was creating this educational poster campaign for middle and high school students. The public health department actually didn't have any materials specific to tobacco prevention among youth. So first we had youth look at past campaigns that had been done on a federal level, so they could kind of see the wide variety of different tactics and strategies used. And again, this was super beneficial for me because, they would say things like, seriously, this was a campaign? Like, that's stupid. And you would be like, yeah, okay. Like, someone worked very hard on that, but, like, yeah, you didn't respond to that. Okay. And then others who are like, wow, this is extremely powerful. Like, I would stop and look at this poster, and here's why. And so from there, we engaged the youth in what's called a design charrette process. I had students then individually sketch out and brainstorm what ideas come to mind if they were thinking of creating their own poster. And it was very, like, it doesn't need to be perfect. It could just be very sketchy, very, like, you could draw a circle, point an arrow and say it's a tree, and that's fine. So to kind of just, like, start coming up with concepts. And so this is for two students. I'll kind of go through all of them. This student on the left, she wanted to show this kind of graffiti cartoon-like visual of what happens to the body over time. Like, you feel like you look cool now, but here's what you can look like in the future. Poster on the right, the student imagined almost like a comic strip-like poster where each grid depicts a different health consequence from vaping, but visualized. Poster on the left, the student focused on peer pressure, normalizing saying no, but still being friends. So, with that person, again, like, non-judgmental, but just saying, I don't want to participate in that, and that's okay. And then on the other, student drew a concept where it looked like an incoming call was happening on a cell phone, and something along the lines of, like, this is a call you'll actually want to answer. And then again here, so we'll just kind of skip through these, but you can kind of just see where youth were, what they were thinking. And I really like this dual faces one where a student inhales and then exhales all of the negative consequences from vaping. And then I do want to focus the one on the right. It's kind of hard to see, but this was a student that we had difficulty engaging with. He would show up every meeting, but when we wanted to engage him to say, hey, what do you think about this? He would be like, I don't care. And you'd be like, okay. When we were doing this project and everyone's just kind of like, oh, I'm not an artist and I'm sketching. He was like hunched over in the corner, like slowly, carefully, meticulously sketching this. And he then explained what it was. And he said, oh, well, like in my mind, I have this, you focus on the end of a vape and it looks like it's lit up like someone's inhaling it. And he's like, and perhaps the smoke, or perhaps within the LED lights, we can write like, some kind of messaging. And he's like, but then I also wanted to show this detailed face, and kind of show the mental health aspects of how it, how vaping can negatively affect your mental health. And I was just like, oh, you were listening, and oh my gosh, like this is amazing. Like and he just, that was just something that it just like did a 180 in terms of engagement, and it was absolutely incredible. And so then after they had their individual, posters, then I would kind of pair them up, and I'd keep pairing them up until they were one large group. And it wasn't just to be like, oh, put everything that you have on one piece of paper. It was an opportunity to engage with each other, to say like, oh, I really like that idea. Can I add on to it? Or like, oh, why don't we merge these concepts and create something new? And so, it was, these are the kind of the last two concepts that they came up with, two different groups. And I just think it's very interesting because they both focused on the future of like how you feel now and how you see yourself now and what you could potentially look like in the future. And again, this methodology was super helpful because it wasn't just like, oh, Tony, your poster was the best, so like we're going with your poster. It was this merging of ideas and building off of each other, so they could collectively come up with this campaign together and something that they could all get behind, as well as how their individual brainstorming contributed to the group. So the next part of the process is we worked with a graphic designer, and we sent these concepts to him and explained their, what they were, the meaning behind them. And so this is what he came up with. He brought back 3 different concepts. We brought it back to the youth again to say, what do you think about this? They had so much to say. They loved the posters, and they were all really excited because they could see their own individual contributions to these posters, and they could see the, the little details of like, oh, that was from mine, and that was from Tony's, and that was from Shelby's. And so that was really great. These are currently in progress. We're anticipating these to be ready in the fall of 2023. The Public Health Department liked these so much that they wanted to create a landing page on their website describing this process of engaging youth, as well as these posters will have a QR code that leads people to this landing page, as well as tobacco prevention resources. And the posters will say designed by high school students in Madison, Wisconsin. And so this will be a 3-part series. The youth are very, very excited about this. And I just think, again, what's exciting overall, as I mentioned in the beginning, is that we turned this program into something that no one had really imagined before. It was super exciting, energizing, and innovative. And why this was successful is not only because of the foundations we established, like stipends and food and transportation, but it also was because we kind of just were flexible and adaptable and worked with the youth together on what this program should be and what they wanted to do. And it makes sense, right? Like, why would adults in a public health department create educational outreach materials aimed at targeting youth? Why can't youth do it? They absolutely can. They are the experts. They are the ones with the lived experience. They are the ones who can and want to shape their environments to be resilient and healthy. So I know I went just a little over time, Danette, but that is what I have for everybody today. I have my email here if people have additional questions after this call. But thank you so much for letting me talk at you today. And I hope that this was helpful in kind of giving some ideas as a stepping stone of what's possible in terms of youth engagement. So thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, Taylor. Fantastic job. When Taylor and I were meeting and talking through the things that she's done in the slides she shared, it's so exciting and it's so energizing. And then at least for me, it's also such a good reminder. When I look around now, after having had so much experience working with youth and seeing the success of youth-led work, I feel like I can spot the adult-driven work that's intended to, speak to youth, as opposed to the youth created the youth-led efforts. I feel like I see it all around now, and you see the difference, and it only makes so much sense, right? That if we want to speak to that audience, we need to not only engage them, but let them lead that process as well. And Taylor, I love that you emphasized how skilled and capable they truly are of doing all of those things as well. So you did a great job there. I do, Maggie put a couple of things in the chat. I'm going to add another resource. This one you sent directly to me, Maggie. So I'm going to copy it. And this is the DHS toolkit on youth advisory councils that I am just putting into the chat as well. And Maggie, if you're still able to, do you want to talk at all about the comment that you put in regarding sharing ideas about the use of Wisconsin's JUUL settlements?
I can, although I am not the expert on what's happening, but the link that I put in is an opportunity. We're seeking community feedback on the JUUL settlement that came to the state of Wisconsin. Those of you who've been in public health for a really long time might remember there was a tobacco settlement many years back, and this is similar with the JUUL funding. And they're holding listening sessions and then collecting feedback, I think, in other ways too. So if you click that link and scroll down just a little bit, you'll see our tobacco prevention and control team has a number of different ways you can share your thoughts about that. So if you feel it should go towards a certain piece of prevention, that's the place to do it.
Fabulous. Thank you so much for clarifying that. I did also just put a link in the chat to our evaluation for today's session. Please share your feedback with us. There's also a space in there for you to let us know what else you would like us to bring to you, to highlight, to elevate in this work that you are doing as well. Any questions from the group? Any comments or even examples of ways that others that are here today have engaged youth in your agencies, in your offices or departments? It's a large but quiet group today. We will share out the recording of this session. Likely it will be attached to the newsletter that will come out at the very end of the month. Jake has been sending those out on the very last day, so it'll come out on the 31st of this month. The recording from this session will be attached there. We're also going to feature some of the work that Taylor has done in that newsletter, and we're always putting calls out. If there are any local and tribal health departments that are engaging with youth, doing work that you would like to share with your colleagues around the state, we are looking for your work to be highlighted in that newsletter as well. So please consider sending us an email, letting us know that you have some information or some work that you would like to share with your colleagues, and we would love to connect with you, learn more about it, and figure out how we can feature that in those newsletters. Does anybody have any last minute questions? Extension team that is present today, we've got several members of our extension team here, Mary, Sheila, and Debbie. Do you have anything that you would like to add or share with this group? All right. On that note, again, we will just really invite and encourage you to engage with our team here at Extension and let us know how we can support the work that you're doing with youth engagement, with all of the objectives that you have chosen for adolescent well-being as a part of your MCH work. We are here to support you and provide that individualized technical assistance. We're also here to bring groups of people together around similar topics so we can kind of collaborate and share ideas and work together as well. So please do not hesitate to reach out to us and to engage, and we are happy to continue to support you in any way that we can in this work that you are doing. With that, we are done just a few minutes early. Taylor, because we have a few minutes, are there any last minute pieces that you would like to share that you felt like you rushed through, or we can let the group go for today?
No, I would just say as well, like I know that extension educators, if you know, they're a good sounding board. So if you're like, I kind of have this idea, or like, can we walk through the curriculum? We're more than happy to do that. In fact, you know, we enjoy doing that of how can we brainstorm and work together. So, you know, with some of these programs, you know, they are established, some of them aren't, right? Some of it just comes from someone saying, I have an idea, can we make this happen? So please, you know, reach out. That's why we're here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for saying that, Taylor. Sometimes it's just that simple ask. Like, I don't even know what I'm asking for, but would you be willing to kind of like brain partner with me on this? And as Taylor mentioned, our extension educators around the state are really eager to support and partner with our local and tribal health departments and other agencies as well. So do not hesitate to reach out to those educators in your county. And if you're not sure who those people are and who you could reach out to for that educator-based connection, again, don't hesitate to reach out to our team, and we can make a direct connection between you and the educators that are serving your county or maybe serving a nearby area as well. And we have a group that is very excited about supporting these efforts and supporting adolescent well-being outside of just this MCH work as well. It's something we're all very passionate about. All right, Maggie or Kara, any last minute thoughts from the two of you? Otherwise, we will let people go for today.
Nothing from me. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thanks to all of you for joining us today. We are grateful for you committing this time, and we'll share resources out via our newsletter.